We all know the year 1776, the soaring words of the Declaration of Independence, the birth of a nation. But America's revolution didn't begin with a pen stroke in a Philadelphia hall. It began a year earlier, with fear, with rage, and with a single gunshot that echoed through the woods, a shot no one can prove, a moment that no history book can fully explain. This is the real spark of American independence, the human story behind the headlines. Welcome to Historica AI, where we bring the untold stories of America to vibrant life. Today, we're rewinding the clock, past the famous declarations and the celebrated victories, back to the raw, uncertain spring of 1775. This was a time when the simmering tensions between the British Crown and its American colonies finally, violently exploded. It wasn't grand political theory that started this war. It was raw, unfiltered human emotion, anger, pride, and the desperation of people who felt they had nothing left to lose. Forget the powdered wigs and the formal portraits for a moment. We're going to the villages, the taverns, and the muddy fields where the idea of America was forged. Not in ink, but in blood and fire. This is the story of how a protest became a revolution. By early 1775, the 13 colonies were a pressure cooker with the lid rattling. For years, Britain had been tightening its grip, imposing taxes on almost everything imaginable, from the tea in their cups to the paper they used for legal documents and newspapers. The colonists called them the Intolerable Acts, and for good reason. What infuriated them most wasn't just the cost, it was the crushing insult of taxation without representation. They were being treated not as subjects of the crown with rights, but as a distant cash machine for the British Empire. But you can only push people so far. In the dimly lit taverns of Boston and the town halls of Virginia, whispers of defiance grew into shouts of rebellion. These weren't aristocrats or philosophers at first. They were ordinary people, farmers who worked the land, blacksmiths who hammered steel, and shopkeepers who knew their customers by name. They began to call themselves patriots, a title that carried both pride and immense danger. They started stockpiling weapons, forming local militias, and practicing drills on their village greens. They were preparing for a fight they hoped would never come. Boston, a bustling port city, became the red-hot center of this defiance. The infamous Boston Tea Party wasn't just a quirky protest. It was a carefully planned act of political theater, a direct and public slap in the face to King George III and the entire British establishment. Dumping 342 chests of tea into the harbor was a declaration that the colonists would not be governed from across an ocean. In response, Britain didn't back down. It doubled down. They shut down Boston Harbor, dissolved the local government, and sent thousands of professional soldiers, the redcoats, to enforce order. The city was under military occupation. The stage was set for a confrontation. On the night of April 18, 1775, the British made their move. Under the cloak of darkness, hundreds of redcoats began to march out of Boston. Their orders were secret, but their destination was the town of Concord, about 20 miles away. Their mission, to seize a hidden cache of cannons, gunpowder, and weapons the Colonial militia had been stockpiling. They thought they could move silently, catching the rebels off guard and extinguishing the spark of rebellion before it became a flame. They were wrong. The Patriots had spies everywhere. As soon as the British troops began to move, so did the Colonial warning system. This is where the legend of Paul Revere's midnight ride comes to life. It wasn't just him. He was one of dozens of riders fanning out across the countryside, their horses galloping through the pitch-black night. Their urgent cry wasn't the polite phrase history books sometimes give us. It was a raw, frantic warning. The regulars are out. The regulars are out. A desperate alert that the king's professional army was on the march against its own people. All through the night, church bells pealed and signal fires blazed from hilltops, a prearranged alarm system waking up farmers, shopkeepers, and Minutemen so named because they had to be ready to fight at a minute's notice. As the first light of dawn broke on April 19th, a small, grim-faced line of about 70 Colonial militia stood waiting on the village green of Lexington. They were farmers and craftsmen, husbands and fathers, clutching their hunting muskets. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and undoubtedly terrified. but they stood their ground, determined to make a stand. And then it happened. The shot heard round the world. As the sun climbed higher, the massive column of British soldiers, in their imposing red uniforms, marched onto Lexington Green, directly confronting the small band of colonists. An officer on the British side yelled, "Disperse, the rebels. Lay down your arms and disperse." For a tense, heart-stopping moment, nobody moved. The air was thick with tension, a standoff between an empire and an idea. Suddenly, a single gunshot cracked the morning air. To this day, no one knows for sure who fired it. Was it a nervous militiaman, a jumpy redcoat, or perhaps a shot from someone hiding behind a wall? It doesn't matter. That single, anonymous shot was the spark that ignited the powder keg. Instantly, the British line erupted in a volley of fire. The colonists, stunned, fired back. Within minutes, the peaceful village green was a chaotic scene of smoke, shouting, and bloodshed. When the smoke cleared, 8 colonists lay dead or dying on the grass. The British troops reformed their ranks and continued their march toward Concord, leaving the first martyrs of the American Revolution behind them. The war had begun. What started as a standoff in Lexington morphed into a running battle that lasted all day. The British found few weapons in Concord, as the Patriots had already moved them. Frustrated, the Redcoats turned back to Boston, but their journey became a nightmare. Thousands of militiamen from all over Massachusetts had answered the alarm. They didn't fight in neat lines like a European army. They fought like men defending their homes, from behind stone walls, trees, and barns. They unleashed a relentless guerrilla-style attack on the marching British column. The Redcoats, trained for open-field battles, were caught in a deadly trap. By the time they staggered back to the safety of Boston, nearly 300 of their soldiers were killed, wounded, or missing. The colonists had proven they would not just protest, they would fight, and they would die for their cause. The news from Lexington and Concord spread like wildfire across the 13 colonies. What had been a Massachusetts problem was now an American one. A cry went up, unifying the colonies as never before. Liberty or death. The Second Continental Congress convened, and peacetime they weren't just writing petitions. They were raising an army. A Virginia delegate named George Washington was appointed to take command of this new Continental Army. The revolution was no longer a fringe movement. It was a full-blown war. That one morning of chaos and courage had awakened a nation, crystallizing the belief that liberty was not something to be negotiated, but a right worth fighting for, worth everything. That single, fateful spark on Lexington Green did more than just start a war. It changed the course of human history. It was the moment a philosophical debate about rights and governance turned into a physical struggle for survival and self-determination. From that moment, freedom ceased to be just a dream spoken in taverns. It became America's destiny, a destiny that would be earned through 8 long years of sacrifice and struggle. The United States wasn't founded on a single day or with a single document. It was built moment by moment, battle by battle, starting with that gunshot in the dawn of April 19, 1775. If you love uncovering the real, human stories behind how our nation truly began, make sure you subscribe to Historica AI. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new episode that brings America as a past to life. Because we believe that history isn't just about dates and names, it's about the pivotal moments that define who we are. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next chapter of history.